What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Data with Peachey episode. This is actually episode 14 now because I know in the last episode I said it was probably episode 13 or 14. Yeah, something like that. It wasn't. I messed up. I actually had to put it in the video that I had messed up. It doesn't matter. That's not about today's video. Today's video is another guest. That's right. I'm bringing another esteemed guest in the data community. This man, him and I, we go way back. I'll tell you, he's got one of the most velvety tones of voice that I think, almost like an angel, some could say. Very angelic. He is a head of data architecture. He's been a chief data architect. He has taught me more about data architecture. He's probably forgot more than I'm ever going to learn, honestly. If you want to know about all things data architecture, not just that from the technical perspective, he can weave you a story. And he will today. I am sure of it because I have the screenshots to prove it. We are going to be talking about all things data quality, data observability, and a little bit about some of the things that he does. So without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Todd Anello is joining us, and he is rocking a Michigan shirt at the time of this recording. Ohio State and Michigan have not played. So yes, I am diehard Buckeye through and through. And he is a proud Michigan Papa. Mr. Anello, welcome to the show.
Mm-hmm. Peachey, to quote you, how you living, baby?
Baby, I'm living. You know, we're living. I'm glad to be here. I cannot think of another person I'd like to talk to more than you right this moment in time.
Hey, ditto, my friend. So real quick, 10 seconds. How was Thanksgiving? What was your favorite meal? Part of your
meal? Thanksgiving is amazing. It's the best meal. I love it. Turkey, obviously, always very, very good. But I'm a big desserts guy, and the cherry pie was, as the kids are saying, it was poppin'. Do the kids still say that? I don't know if they do.
Who cares? We say it.
We say it. It was. I almost ate the whole thing. It was amazing.
Also, my wife had a special request. She wanted, of course, I was going to make pumpkin pie. Mm-hmm. She wanted a apple pie, but she didn't want just an apple pie. She wanted a Dutch apple pie.
Oh, it's the best.
Of course, I go into architect, engineering, play and build run mode, and I pull up the recipe, and I'm like, okay, I got everything. And do you realize if you make a homemade apple pie, that it is at least 5 pounds of apples for one pie?
I did not know that, actually.
Okay. And I will share with you the recipe I used for your viewers. You can make it.
Yes,
make a chat link.
I was going to say they would like that.
Yeah. So I started early evening, around 12:40 in the morning. I was setting it up to cool. But I have to tell you, best apple pie ever. It was.
Oh,
really
I would
good.
certainly hope so. Damn.
Yeah, it was good. Well, and it wasn't that the time was not to make it special. The time was just following along. Apple carving takes a little bit longer with 5 pounds of apples than you would think.
How many bushels of apples is that?
It's not all that. So it's 2 small to medium sized bags, and the recipe will tell you don't use one kind of apple. So I had 1 bag of Granny Smith and 1 bag of Fuji. So you need the tart and you need the sweet. Yeah.
I bet that was amazing. Now I really want apple pie.
It is. Yeah, it is amazing.
So, all right, I know you, and obviously we go way back, but
yes,
the viewers and the podcasters, the people that are out there either listening on their favorite podcasting application or following along, watching on YouTube, they don't. So who are you? What do you do? Tell us something about yourself other than the fact that you just peeled a whole bunch of apples.
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. Glad to be here. And thanks to Scott for taking the time to host me. My name's Todd Anello. I'm the head of data architecture at Invesco. I recently woke up thinking that 2025 was coming, and that number 5, for some reason, it hit a buzzer with me. And I realized that in 2025, I will have been an architect for 20 years.
Congratulations.
Well, yeah, but 20 years. So,
I got to tell you what, you don't look a day over 28. So you must have started
Sure.
real
Yeah.
early.
Yeah. Whatever. Okay. And checks in the mail. Thanks for that.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
so I actually started my life as a photographer. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But I went to Kent State University for photojournalism. This was about the time that photography was starting to enter the digital age, but even then we were shooting film and we used to have to scan in the negatives. And I used to scan in negatives and do a lot of work for the Columbus Dispatch. And I grew up with computers. My dad was a mainframe director and engineer. He worked for Goodyear Aerospace. He worked for Kent State University, and he always made sure that technology was in the house. I took it for granted. My first computer was an Apple II Plus,
Mm.
and I just always had technology in my life. Never really thought too much about it. As I was doing the scanning for the dispatch, and I was desperately trying to be a photojournalist, I I was working with Macintosh computers, and while I was doing that, unfortunately, one of them broke, and I fixed it. And the IT person for the dispatch, one of my really good friends, Mark Seipel, he comes up and he says, "So number one, don't ever touch our things." And he said, then he said, "Number two, how'd you fix it?" And I said, "Oh, it was easy. Like I went to a computer that was working and I figured out all the keystrokes to change the monitor resolution, and then the graphics card kicked back in and it was fine." He goes, "Okay." He goes, "Have you ever thought about going into tech? We have this open role." And I looked at the job description and there was just all kinds of things and acronyms and all kinds of things I didn't know. But on there was Unix, and I had been in an explorers group when I was in high school. We used to go to Bell Labs, which turned into AT&T, and we used to get to play on their internal Unix systems. And so I knew a little bit about Shell. I knew a little bit, and so long story short, ended up getting my first IT job offer at the dispatch around 1997. Spent some time there. Was their webmaster for a while. I did a lot with their mail servers and just the basic infrastructure. And I took a lot of performance classes for Sun OS, Solaris, and I in 2001 had my interview with Nationwide, and I joined them as an administrator. And I have never seen systems work so hard in my life to do business. The things that they would show you as examples of a system that is in dire straits, um,
Was
these
the norm.
systems were eclipsing that. and so and so I got to actually use that use that specialty, and I learned a ton. I had a great group of people in my admin group, but we were starting down this journey of virtualizing Linux on mainframe, if you can imagine that. And I got pulled into that project, and it was a very big project. They actually put us in a separate room and cleared our calendars for
Mm.
months and told us, "This is your life. This is what you're going to do." And it was in that time that I met my first architect, my first IT architect. And it wasn't understanding that that was the name of the role. It was listening to that person speak and how they had to tie things together, how they had to problem solve, how they had to tell a story, how they had to influence other people. And I said, "What is that?" And that became my journey. And I started to do the work to learn those things. And then I got my first technology area leader architect role as a Linux architect in '05. And then in 2008, I became director of platform. And then Nationwide started the big data journey. And, big shout out to Tara Pater, who brought me in over in what became the first enterprise data office at Nationwide. And I haven't looked back since. It's been very cool being able to merge technology and platform and lower level infrastructure and technology and to sit data on top of that, and the way that you think about IT and think about tech when you have that kind of a background has really enhanced data for me. And I also didn't have a lot of the, I'm not saying that people that have been in data for a long time, excuse the word baggage, but I didn't come at it with a traditional RDBMS three-tiered
Hmm.
architecture type of view. I got dropped in right in the middle of big data, and so there was a lot of talk about unstructured data and semi-structured data, and the analytics that runs in the same platform as the data. And much of what you see now in architectures like Snowflake and other things like that was
Hmm.
really starting to evolve then. And and these companies were trying to figure that out because they were desperately trying to move people away from a storage based solution that then had analytics, perhaps further downstream, way downstream, which to our point today could cause a lot of problems with data quality and
Hmm.
data being where it needs to be at the right time. And so that was the journey. I left Nationwide and went to another great company, DTN. Still have some friends working there, and I was a chief data architect for them. And then I moved from there to Invesco, and I'm doing the gig now, and I've got an amazing group of architects that work for me. And I will say, by and large, and not even by and large, completely 100%, um, every move along this way, once I became a people leader, it was those architects that were in my teams that really just made the difference. I've worked with some amazing people and had some just outstanding people work for me, so that's been the journey, right? I talk a lot about what is our legacy as technology people, and if you
Hmm.
think back 15 years or 20 years in my case of maybe things you've built, are they even still around? If they are, if they are like me, they're considered technical debt. Right? So, but what is your legacy? And your legacy is the people.
Yeah.
It's the people that you've helped move ahead. It's the people that you've helped shape their careers. And so I've been very blessed that I've been able to do that. So that's a little bit about me and my journey from there to here. Yeah, and it's hard to think that you can sum up 20 years like that, but yeah, you
I
can.
mean, you can. I mean, you've done a lot. When you think about it, as like you've enhanced so many different people's lives, not just mine, of course. I mean, I'm going to be selfish for a minute, and I mean, you and I have talked a lot, so I appreciate you even just taking the time to mention everything that you went through. Is like the idea is like, you didn't go through the traditional what some of the folks that might be listening to this podcast like. I went to school for this, and then I did this, and then look, I'm telling you, to kind of get into data and even in technology, you don't have to be a quote unquote classically trained
Oh,
technologist or classically trained data person. Sometimes it just happens, and that is the way it is. So before I ask another question, but I would say is, if you're watching this on YouTube, Todd mentioned being a photographer. I'm going to overlay photos, some of your favorite photos during that section. So if you're listening on your favorite podcasting application, consider jumping to YouTube at some point just to see the pictures. I've seen them. I love them. I've already saved them to my own personal photos reel so I can use them as backgrounds on my phone because I love them that much.
I get
But yes,
royalties.
we'll work on that. The check's in the mail, right? We'll figure it out. Like I'll return to sender. The check that you sending me, I'll send it back. But you talked a lot about the evolution, and there's this term that keeps popping up all over the place. Now I know that I know it. We talk about data quality a lot. One question I have is, you're going to hear define data quality and data observability. So there's this thing that keeps rumbling around on LinkedIn and through all the professional blogs and this, that, and the other. How does data quality and data observability kind of intersect with one another? Like what am I looking at there?
Okay. So, I mean, I think it's a relatively new phenomenon and something that I think that we've all had a gut feeling about. In that, if you think about batch and you think about landing data somewhere and then moving it on some timetable and transforming it on some timetable, somewhere in that timetable, rules are getting applied. And I'm going to say, let's talk about metadata for a second. So let's talk about technical metadata versus business metadata.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about technical metadata being schemas and number of rows and source to target and all that kind of thing. And then you think about business metadata, which is what does this matter? Who's going to use it? What's the business context of the data?
Yep.
Data quality rules are evolving in that manner. So if you think about data quality rules as being the business rule being applied, or the technical rule being applied to move things from one state to another, I think data quality is starting to evolve to be more fluid, and it's not just at one or two places in the data flow. It's going to be throughout the data pipeline. And as we start to talk about data being built as code, and that evolution from those batch type of architectures to things that are more near real time or at least more fluid, then data quality has a role to play throughout that data lifecycle rather than you set your rule, it executes, and the next thing that happens is someone else's problem. That is gone. And so one of the things that you have to understand about our desire to get there is who's watching.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the intersection between quality and observability. And so it is that something is making sure not so much that the rule fired, because the quality technology can take care of that at any given time. Did the rule fire, right? Is the intended outcome happening? So if you are trying to build something downstream and you have a quality issue, and the next thing that happens is that you have erroneous data, would you rather have the last known good data, or would you rather have a blank screen, or would you be okay with erroneous data being out on your website? And those things are a mix between observability and data quality.
Yep.
And if you would bring up the horizontal graphic,
Gotcha.
and I'll kind of run through the analogy. Scott mentioned, that I like to tell stories. So, in this story, and excuse me while I bring it up too, because the font is so small.
Apologies if the font is small. You can if the what did I just say? The font is small. You can actually put us on your television by using the casting option.
Yeah, or get a big microscope.
Or
Yeah,
get a really big
um,
microscope.
yeah. All right. So in this analogy, you've got a couple product owners. Um, you have a glass person who makes glasses is a glass blower. We'll make that Scott because he blows hot air. Um, the
You're not
cheese
wrong.
guy, the cheese guy. I have the beard, so I'll play the cheese guy. But these are product owners, and you're going to hear that a lot in the coming weeks and months and years if you haven't already about data products. And I'll talk a little bit about that later and where you might get some more information on that. But you've got these people that are creating products in this world. One's making glasses, one's making cheese. And all the way on the right, you have basically a restaurant that is going to ship some wine and some cheese. And so the products are created, and they're put into some sort of a packaging because they're going to get shipped overseas. And so the observability is, did the correct number of items make it to each container? Um, a quality would be, do the weights of the products match the order? Are the destination addresses valid addresses? So we talk about a lot about address cleansing and things like that. So those are quality rules. They're not observability rules. And before we go too far, I do want to qualify, when I say observability, I mean, every time I say that word, I mean data observability.
Yep.
Observability today is an ecosystem, and it should be. And it should have connective tissue to things like the observability of platforms, which is different than the observability of data. Yes, I can have something observe my data platform and tell me if it's up, if it's down, if it's under distress because of performance. But can it tell me that I had a column go null? Can it tell me that decimal points moved? No, because it's not talking SQL. It's not talking data, right? So in this, I'm not saying in lieu of something like Splunk. I'm saying in addition to it, we have to evolve our understanding of observability to be more of an ecosystem, much like the way we think about data. So now that we have our products, they're going to get on a ship, and I won't go through each one of these, but then when the ship is traveling, there's events, right? There's weather, there's time, there's resources on the ship, right? So if you're observing the events, will events like weather, theft, or resource constraints impact the delivery time of these items? From a quality perspective, will the events like weather impact, the original requirements around, whether each of those crates were chilled appropriately so that the cheese didn't go bad and things like that. And then as you move on, did all the containers arrive undamaged? That's an observability trait. Did the items pass inspection? So yes, they came in one piece, they got there on time, but once you unpack them, again, get into the table, the data table, um, did everything get there as expected? Did it pass inspection? That's a quality rule, right? So again, observability and quality working together. And then at the end, this is kind of unique because I get into the sort of the business context of this. Are the patrons getting their meals and wine served in under 15 minutes, which is the restaurant's SLA, right? And then from a quality perspective, when they leave, what's their Yelp rating of those things? Another quality item would be, what is the health code rating of the restaurant? So then you have sort of this whole observation of the restaurant from a customer perspective, but then you also have, quality questions about atmosphere and food and and things like that. So to just kind of put it in context, you can't do those two things independently when we're talking about the future of data, and that you need to be able to observe what's happening in the ecosystem. And I'll use the words active metadata, and what I mean by that is that as things are changing inside of the data pipeline, you're getting feedback about that as active metadata. Those become inputs into observability, and that can also feed into your larger data layer in your larger ecosystem to say, here's what's going on in your environment. The analogy Scott mentioned, that I like to tell stories. So, in this story, and excuse me while I bring it up too, because the font is so small.
Apologies if the font is small. You can if the what did I just say? The font is small. You can actually put us on your television by using the casting option.
Yeah, or get a big microscope.
Or
Yeah,
get a really big
um,
microscope.
yeah. All right. So in this analogy, you've got a couple product owners. Um, you have a glass person who makes glasses is a glass blower. We'll make that Scott because he blows hot air. Um, the
You're not
cheese
wrong.
guy, the cheese guy. I have the beard, so I'll play the cheese guy. But these are product owners, and you're going to hear that a lot in the coming weeks and months and years if you haven't already, about data products. And I'll talk a little bit about that later and where you might get some more information on that. But you've got these people that are creating products in this world. One's making glasses, one's making cheese. And all the way on the right, you have basically a restaurant that is going to ship some wine and some cheese. And so the products are created, um, and they're put into some sort of a packaging because they're going to get shipped overseas. And so the observability is, did the correct number of items make it to each container? Um, a quality would be, do the weights of the products match the order? Are the destination addresses valid addresses? So we talk about a lot about address cleansing and things like that. So those are quality rules. They're not observability rules. And before we go too far, I do want to qualify, when I say observability, I mean, every time I say that word, I mean data observability.
Yep.
Observability today is an ecosystem. and it should be. And it should have connective tissue to things like the observability of platforms, which is different than the observability of data. Yes, I can have something observe my data platform and tell me if it's up, if it's down, if it's under distress because of performance. But can it tell me that I had a column go null? Can it tell me that decimal points moved? No, because it's not talking SQL. It's not talking data, right? So in this, I'm not saying in lieu of something like Splunk. I'm saying in addition to it, we have to evolve our understanding of observability to be more of an ecosystem, much like the way we think about data. So now that we have our products, they're going to get on a ship, and I won't go through each one of these, but then when the ship is traveling, there's events, right? There's weather, there's time, there's resources on the ship, right? So if you're observing the events, will events like weather, theft, or resource constraints impact the delivery time of these items? From a quality perspective, will the events like weather impact, the original requirements around, whether each of those crates were chilled appropriately so that the cheese didn't go bad and things like that. And then as you move on, did all the containers arrive undamaged? That's an observability trait. Did the items pass inspection? So yes, they came in one piece, they got there on time, but once you unpack them, again, get into the table, the data table, um, did everything get there as expected? Did it pass inspection? That's a quality rule, right? So again, observability and quality working together. And then at the end, this is kind of unique because I get into the sort of the business context of this. Are the patrons getting their meals and wine served in under 15 minutes, which is the restaurant's SLA, right? And then from a quality perspective, when they leave, what's their Yelp rating of those things? Another quality item would be, what is the health code rating of the restaurant? So then you have sort of this whole observation of the restaurant from a customer perspective, but then you also have, quality questions about atmosphere and food and and things like that. So to just kind of put it in context, you can't do those two things independently when we're talking about the future of data, and that you need to be able to observe what's happening in the ecosystem, and I'll use the words active metadata. And what I mean by that is that as things are changing inside of the data pipeline, you're getting feedback about that as active metadata. Those become inputs into observability, and that can also feed into your larger data layer in your larger ecosystem to say, here's what's going on in your environment. And then lastly, what I'll say is that if you ever hope to have, and you should, mitigation, right, then that mitigation is going to be proactive. And Gartner went to the last data and analytics summit here in Orlando, Florida, last year, or I guess that would be this year in March. And for the first time, I heard the term augmented data quality. And I'll read you guys the definition because I always want to make sure these are Gartner's words, and it is a good definition. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences here. But Gartner defines augmented data quality as a fundamental shift in solving data quality issues through the application of active metadata, AI, NLP, and graph technologies. Data and analytics leaders can evaluate these solutions' critical capabilities and common use cases in the research that they've provided. So when you think about data quality already, because Gen AI, everything, right?
Oh Lord,
Um,
yes.
but in something that's actually applicable, can we start to be, from a machine learning perspective or from an analytics perspective, more responsive to potential errors? So can you maybe stop a flow from continuing based on the fact that you've detected errors? Can you make a change to a decimal point based on the fact that you know a known rule? And even though you're further down in the pipe where maybe that rule already fired, can you go ahead and mitigate? And those are the things that obviously there's a lot of code, a lot of thoughtfulness there that you have to apply, and we're not there yet. But I think that's the goal, right? Is to get to the point where you are having systems start to understand what you think and what you know as your data quality and what your outcomes are, and then to make specific changes within the pipeline so that that reality and that mitigation reality happens.
So I got a pretty good idea the answer to this question because you kind of hinted at it, and I had imagined that this is probably the big one of the big reasons. But why is this? Why is this such a hot topic? What the convergence of data quality, traditional data quality, and data observability? It's a hugely hot topic right now. Why? What's driving the trend? I got a pretty good guess, but
Yeah, I
why?
mean, and I understand the words, and I'm not saying it's not correct, but what you hear come out of people's mouth is that, if you are going to do generative AI, then you better have the best data possible, right? So you don't have issues with the outcomes of those analytics. Well, I would tell you, whether it's descriptive analytics, predictive analytics, or generative AI, that should have always been our goal, and it was. I don't, I have been in a couple places where the words data quality or trusted data make their way to C-level strategies, the company objectives for a year. You know, uh, you will see the word data, but to have it coupled with the word quality or trusted
Mm-hmm.
is a very specific shot across the bow that says, not only do I want you to do it, and this is the really critical part, can you show me for sure that it was done? How can you tell me that I am consuming quality data?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very specific and equally important part of this conversation, is that once you have this set up, you should always be thinking, can my observability and data quality technology give me feedback that I can put in a dashboard that is near real time? We need to evolve from, you're not going to have at the end of the quarter be able to say we were mostly green.
Mm-hmm.
How is it happening every day? Can somebody look in on that? Is going to be, I think, very important. And I think, the analytics that's evolving, um, our application of that within data governance is going to be equally important to be able to start leveraging technologies like that. And I think that that's what you're seeing in this very important space, is that the vendors are really starting to get it. And in fact, if you watch, in what I've observed is, the smart ones are starting to pull together data quality and observability in the platform. And instead of us having to, ad hoc pull all that together a la carte, we're starting to see vendors, raise the bar a little bit, and having both of those capabilities on the platform, because the metadata is already there, and can you start reacting to it, just on the platform instead of integrating with something else? So it's always kind of interesting to watch, the light on the hill in terms of, what the vendors are trying to reach for, because there's a reason for it. They're getting that request from people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, so to answer your question, I think the staple answer is, hey, we're entering into this new phase, and you and I have gone back and forth on this on LinkedIn. Can you trust the data before you run generative AI in it? Because if you don't, what you get, could be disastrous, and it could be disastrous before you know it, because it could be a nuance, right?
Mm-hmm.
It might not be as obvious as a picture or a movie or things that we see online.
So one thing, so this is a question, I always I get teased you about when we were talking, is like we'll get into this conversation and then it'll spin up other questions that we didn't tee up, and so I think a lot of times, and I've noticed this a lot in the previous places that I've been, and I know you and I've talked about this, is I think sometimes people being senior leaders, managers, data users, whatever you want to say, they will say things like, I need quality data to do my job. and then you ask them a question. What does that mean to you? And then they usually go, well, I don't know. It's accurate. And it's like one tiny sliver of a thing in terms of like the whole pie of data quality. And they're definitely not talking about observability, right? Like that's a
Yeah, no.
concept that's so far down. And so I would say is, are you starting to see the trend business to business where there's a need or an understanding that the business side provides some sort of contextual requirements
Hmm.
around quote unquote quality data? Because I think maybe they're starting to understand of, oh, I actually have to say what I need that data to be before I do a thing.
Right. Okay. So um, I think it's not a trend; it's a requirement. And what you're starting to see is people are starting to shine the spotlight further away from the warehouse and the collection of large pools of data into fit for purpose data products that then are used downstream for specific use cases. So when you think about the power of SQL and being able to basically write anything against a data set and get your answers, APIs are a little bit different because it starts with the answer in mind, right? And then you formulate the question, and then the data that has to be able to provide the answer better be there. That's a data product. So the data product being built for a very specific downstream reason is going to have very specific business data quality rules that are observed, which makes this whole thing a little bit more palatable because to try to do that against the ocean of, you know, large data sets, especially when you've got dev going on and people are moving things around, the data product should be your probably the best example of a data product would be master data. It is highly governed. Has to be of good quality. And if there's rules coming in from your CRM or other places that are making sure that those fields are getting updated and making sure that the addresses have gone through scrubbing and all those types of things, then that's a set of data quality rules. The usage of that master, also, we will talk a little bit about FinOps, right? Observability can help you not only with what's going on, but are you getting the business value out of that data product? Is a huge question,
Yeah.
especially when you're talking about building master data management systems. Are you getting the downstream value? How do you know you need to scale it? And it's one of the beautiful things about cloud, but it's also, a potential pitfall is that, you wouldn't want these things scaling automatically, especially if they're growing at that rate. But observability can help you with, the financial aspect of what's going on with that bounded context, which is a data product. Yes, it's on a platform, but other things are on that platform. So you have to have the observability local to the product. And then you can understand how's it being used and are you having any issues with it? And then that product owner is the person who should be brokering that conversation between business requirements and their manifestation into those quality rules. And then hopefully they understand that ecosystem well enough that the observability pieces are in place. Not saying that there couldn't be specific observability rules for the data product based on a business use case. And that's what's so great about this architecture is that the observability isn't out of the box. You can create your own custom things based on an outcome that you have downstream. And so yeah, I think these things are great. They're great concepts, but I do think that as humans, we have to logically bundle things together so they
Mhm.
make sense and they become more manageable.
So obviously, goal state, the yellow brick road's going to lead us to Oz, and we're going to have all our data with the quality rules and observability rules in place, and it's going to be automated. Probably not a lot of organizations are at that Oz state yet, but so I'll ask, where do they even like? Where do you even get started? Like, if you're just a like, they're looking at you, they're listening to this podcast, going, and this is all great and it's all rosy. How, like, where do I even go to get started? What do they do?
I mean, that's a great question, and I mean, I do think some of this stuff, and I've been doing architecture a long time, we are always looking ahead, and there's the what and the why. So I think you definitely have to solve the why. Is there even a problem to solve yet? Some organizations are just not at that immediacy level, or they're not able to have the type of metadata maturity, that's needed. The other thing with this is that this isn't just a technology issue. This is a people issue. So if you don't have business teams that have that burning platform and are willing to come to the table, I think that's number one. If you already have data quality in place, then I think thinking about data observability is your next step, because even with batch, or even with some of the data quality tools that are a little bit more on the legacy side, observability can help you understand issues before they happen, and then you can start to come up with remediation plans, and that could either be a separate set of code, it could be a different tool, it could be a page, yeah, pager. 20 years, see, told you. So, so, so it can be, it could be a journey that just starts with, hey, we were doing this today, and I want to take that to the next level. I would say that's probably the best thing to do, rather than to think that this is a greenfield thing where you have to throw away what you've done, or that you have to invest in a new piece of technology. Even if you could invest in an observability tool, but you still have traditional data quality, you should be able to make a big difference in understanding when something is going to have a downstream impact. One of the things is nightly flows that don't run, and then you end up with things that trigger either empty fields, or they trigger data that's out of date. Understanding that end-to-end observability, data observability can help with. Mix that in with platform observability, and then I would say, if you're going to go down this path, talk to your infrastructure team and get them to elevate that platform observability maybe just a little bit. Help me out with performance of this data platform. This is what good looks like. This is normal. I need to know when it's not. Um, uh, you know, so performance is one, and I think that the platform observability can help with that. And then what's inside of, so you got that you have an egg, there's a shell. Is it cracked? Is it faded? Then what's inside of the shell, then that's the data observability piece, right? So you have to have both sides of that in order to get full context of what's going on. So I think maybe going that space, the observability space, would be a nice step in the right direction, without feeling like you had to flush your whole technology stack and reimagine this. And quite frankly, I think that's how we work anyway. Is that one of the biggest things, I guess, if you're a data leader, or you're in our space, is showing value and
Mhm.
being able to say, we stopped these things from happening, or this is an assessment of the data, and its amount of quality, and it's based on these things. And that's the thing, is that we're data people, and sometimes we don't do a good job of saying these seemingly qualitative measures are not, they're quantitative, and they're based on these things. um, Having that conversation with your business, which you just called it out, you said, what does quality mean to you? I don't think you can take no for an answer. I think you have to, but I do think you have to lead the witness, right? I think you have to say,
Mhm.
would this be okay? Would that be okay? Would you be okay if this didn't update? What if this decimal point moved, or there was a following zero? Like, well, that would be embarrassing, but it wouldn't be the end of the world. So you can sort of back into rules that way. You can take existing rules and maybe poke on those a little bit and say, why did we do this? And especially if you get an answer that says, I don't know, then the question is, well, how old is that rule? Is it still valid?
Mhm.
You know, is it doing its job, or even worse, is it doing the opposite of its job?
Does it
So I think,
exist?
Does it exist? Yeah, right. So I think diving into your existing portfolio of rules and taking a look at your logs, how what's running, what's not, where are you getting errors today that you weren't maybe a year or two ago. Maybe someone moved a data set and didn't tell somebody. Just cleaning up, and then maybe then doing a double click into the rules that are actually functioning and making sure that they are providing the outcomes that were desired. And then I think for technologists, it's the answer behind the answer, right? Or the question behind the question. So tell me more about this. Why is this important? Well, we get audited XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
And if this doesn't happen, then this is the intended outcome. The technologists can then maybe reverse engineer that to say, you know what, there's a better way to do this. And we don't have to guess at the end of the quarter. We'll know right away if we implement this kind of approach. That is the conversation I think you want to have with the business, because now you're talking their language and you are building effectively, this is all about building a control. And you can't build a control if you don't have a Peachey
Oh, a requirement.
policy.
Sorry, I was gonna say policy
Exactly.
requirement. Which one do you want?
There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, you got it.
Sorry, I
Right.
was just
So,
kind of like, I was like,
yeah.
I didn't know I was gonna be quizzed on this. Sorry, no, you're right.
Yeah, well,
You
it
you
works
gotta
both
have
ways, baby.
you gotta have the policy. You gotta know what's your North Star. What are you trying to attain to? Is like you gotta have a requirement. You gotta have a policy. Policy typically gives you the idea of where you're trying to go. So from that perspective, you gotta have it. So here's what I'll
Right.
ask you: is so this newish concept, especially to some of our senior leaders, what advice? I mean, this is like a 2, maybe 3-part question, but it's different
Ooh.
parts. I know, right? I'm going to make it work on this one. You threw me for a loop there, making me come up with a word. So I'm going to get you back here. So the advice that you would give to organizations going down this journey, however, the advice, what would you give this most senior leaders, somebody in their organizations coming to them to talk about this topic? What advice would you give them when they're hearing this topic? Maybe for the first time, probably not the first time, but probably in this level of depth the first time. What advice would you give them?
Well, I would say first off, don't make it a technical conversation. And I would look for that thing. Do your homework. Go in with a couple examples where data quality is or has caused issues, and own that. Because things happen in the environment. You're not in that room on trial for those things that happened 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, a month ago, 2 months ago. You're there to pitch a remedy. Um, I would take unintended consequences examples, but I would also take some policies and explain, is the control that we have today adequate? And I would present it as a question, and I would have options. Option one is that we do nothing and we keep things the way they are. And if we do, these are the outcomes. This is what we can expect. Uh, if we add generative AI to the mix, then these are the things that I don't know, because I don't know if we're going to have the kind of quality data. I can't tell you until this time, after this flow, I can perhaps measure it. But if you want to measure it in real time, we're not to that capability level yet. So I think staying away from words like data quality, and staying away from words like data observability. Again, that's how. The
Mhm.
first order of business is why. And so, being a senior executive or being somebody who is going to that sort of a forum, whether it's a board meeting or CIO or whatever, and trying to sell this concept, I think you have to start with what is the outcome, and you base that on that business's current state, and unfortunately, I think you got to go in with some bruises and say, here's some places where, even if there are places where you intended, quality to work, and maybe it's not, because the environmentals have changed, again, observability. Then once you get through we can do better at this, the question will come, how? And if that's a different meeting or it's the same meeting, then I think it's an architectural discussion on the differences between current state and future state, that gap analysis, and what does observability do to that gap. It crushes this gap, it helps with this gap. How does augmented data quality differ, and why is it going to make a difference in the gap analysis that you did? And then I think the journey is a little bit easier to talk about, because you're not just going in with, I need to buy a tool.
Yep.
And that would be the advice I would give is, please, please, please don't start with the technology. Start with the business outcomes in mind, and then back into that, and make sure every time there's that step back, that person that you're influencing is right there with you. They understand. Use your analogies, use your storytelling. Make sure that that they're tracking, and then at the time that you get the okay to do it, then execute on the plan, and then make sure that you're giving updates. So you remember we talked about being able to crush the gap. We put in part one. We're now able to identify that gap every time it happens, right? So we weren't able to do that before. You can't crush what you can't see. So we've done that part. Now we're going to get this piece of technology, and we're going to write code that's going to make sure that we can remediate when we see it, we can remediate it. And then you take that step. And so it's a journey. It takes patience, but I think if people know why you're doing it, and that, again, why, then I think that's the way to be successful.
So we started this show talking about how neither you or I are really truly classically trained in terms of the technology bits and bytes and then the data bits and bytes. But what I'll ask is maybe some of the listeners are, again, not classically trained individuals or students looking to become part of this. Really, honestly, I love being in the data space. Like, it's awesome. I really do enjoy it. Um, what skills or knowledge should data professionals be developing in this evolving landscape that we're dealing with? So obviously we could say, I got Python, I got R, I got all kinds of code. Cool. But what other skills or knowledge out there could they really start leaning into?
So, I mean, I would go back to, understanding how to read and how to create data models. Understanding, data at its core. I think that metadata is sorely overlooked in terms of a skill. I think we see it as an outcome or something that's out there, but actually, I use the words metadata management, because it means that somebody has got an eye on it. Somebody has a RACI defined against it. And we're all, I won't say all, but at least most of the people that I've talked to, it's a gap. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's not only a maturity thing, but it's peripheral. It's something that's happening in the ecosystem that sometimes you tap into it, sometimes you don't. I mean, I would argue that metadata is the thing that tells you what's happening. I laugh all the time because I built a Plex server so that I can host internal movies off of my NAS, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um,
All
then
legally acquired. If anybody's
of
listening,
course,
all legally acquired.
absolutely, yeah. I show you the stack of DVDs and Blu-rays that were mine that were just all in a box somewhere. So now I can actually use them. And so when it understands the disk, and it thinks that baby shiny new year is actually Rudolph, right? Then the metadata, the year it was made, the actors, the description,
Mm-hmm.
the picture that shows up, like on Netflix when you go to a movie and you see the picture of the movie. Imagine if you're gonna watch a kids show, but the picture says The Godfather. Are you gonna click on it and with your grandchild? Probably
Mm-hmm.
not. It's metadata, and
Yeah.
it's so important. And as I'm loading all these movies of mine, and letting databases basically recognize and send metadata, um, I am I am observing it.
Yep.
right? And when it's not right, I get frustrated and I go click on another TV database, and then sometimes I manually go and get the right picture for the movie and put that in, and sometimes I just need to change the year, and then all of a sudden it has context and the right metadata comes. So when we talk about these things, we do it in our on our personal lives like crazy,
Yeah.
you know. But like at work in a larger ecosystem, are you thinking that way about your data? Are you know, and you and I've talked about this before, and it's so hard to get this started because it's a cultural thing. But what
Yeah.
about tagging? The
Yes.
reason why the stuff online works is because there's immense amounts of tagging. Some of that is even being done through, you know, social groups, and it's been crowdsourced, right? When you get into work, then all of a sudden the systems are supposed to figure it out, and the same rules apply. No metadata, no good data,
Yeah.
right? Right,
It
and
is
bad outcomes.
sorely overlooked. You and I
Yep.
talk about it all the time. It's like
Yep.
metadata can be so powerful, and it is always like, yeah, I mean, it's just data about data. I'm like, first of all, that makes me just when they do. It's like you don't understand when you care and feed for the metadata. You can do so many things. So what you just said about the Plex server in the movies, that is
Yeah.
a real world personal example. Why
Yep.
wouldn't we do that? And I'll say the unpopular part out loud is a lot of times I've seen businesses don't do that, or they assume that the system will do that, and they don't see the ROI on doing that because they don't think about it in the context of what you just said. They don't put
Yeah,
it in the context of the Netflix movie.
yeah, and you know, and we have to be careful making metadata a project.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know how else to say that it needs to be a core piece of the service offering of the group, whether it's, you know, the engine data engineering group, or it's a data office, or, you know, everybody out there knows their own construct. Should never go to a funding meeting for 2025 asking for metadata management funding. Please don't do that.
No. Yeah.
Figure out how to make it part of your day. Figure out how to get your staff aligned to it. If tagging is the way forward, and SharePoint has its method of tagging, and then so does another platform or your email system 365, whatever it is, um, and you have data engineers that are working in something like Snowflake, then what's the metadata solution for tagging in those platforms, and go get after it,
Yep.
and then bubble that up to, you know, either you know, a UI layer, or just even just basic training that says every time you create X, I need you to do these things. You
Yep.
know, and for some groups, it pops up a dialog box. You don't have a choice. Well, that's great. You know, and maybe that's where we're at, is that, you know, you need to take it, you know, out of the question mark and make it something that's mandated. But the collection of that metadata and tagging and taxonomies and things like that are what is going to give you the foundational support for the more sexier things that happen later, i.e., generative AI,
Yep.
right? So when you ask me where do people start, or like where should people focus, um, you know, unfortunately I think it's in this world, you know, people are going to want you, you know, go get your free license, start playing with generative AI, start, you know, but don't forget, AI is a consumer of data. It is another use case, like a
Mm-hmm.
BI tool or a query, right? Um, you have to make sure, as a professional or a student who wants to get into space, that you're also at the very far left hand side, which is data acquisition and data storage, data curation, and data transformation. Those things are never going to stop. They may move around to different platforms and different technologies, but the core of what we do from a data professional perspective remains. And it always will be that way. And so understanding what those nouns and those verbs mean in a modern generative AI or modern analytic age is really the question to ask yourself. You know, do you need to go and learn mainframe technology because it had, it had its own storage and it, has its own database and, no, but those principles still remain. So now what you need to do is elevate that to today's consumption layer, and then understand how does that happen? How do those data verbs and nouns happen today? Well, they happen in code. They happen in tools like DBT and Airflow and other things, and that's today. And then tomorrow it might be something else. So at the time you're there and you're thinking about this space, don't just fixate on the far right side. If you're going to be a data professional, then you really have to also commit yourself to the left hand side, which is the care and feeding of data management.
Love it. So as we come up on the hour of our podcast, I'll end it like this. Couple questions, more personal, of course. If you
Of
weren't
course.
working in data, what's your dream job? Dream job. Lay it out for us.
Wow, I love what I do, and I think it's hard to imagine doing other things because this job isn't just data. This job isn't just architecture. My favorite part of what I do is when I can help make a light bulb go off. And getting into a room and sharing a presentation or an analogy like I did today, and doing that and having somebody grasp what could be a difficult topic. If I wasn't doing this, I think I told you, I started off as a photographer. I would have always loved to do that. I also garden a lot, so I think my dream retirement job is to go get my master gardener certificate from
I didn't
the.
even know that was a thing.
No, it is. Yeah, yeah. And actually, the extension up the road for Orange County, they give them to you for free, but it takes you like half a year to go through the classes. So,
Wow,
you know,
really?
yeah,
Yeah, I had
yeah,
no idea.
yeah. That's cool. Well, there's a lot to it, right? So, even just being able to do that, and I think after retirement, that might be a nice thing to do. But at this point, I can't really think of doing anything else. I look at all the other jobs out there, and I like what we do. I'm proud of what I do. I'm like I said, I'm proud of the teams that I've had and the team that I have, and they're really what makes every day special.
I love it. Last question before we let you go. Your
Okay.
favorite tech gadget? Because I obviously on the other side, I ran a tech YouTube channel. It's
Yep.
still sitting over there doing live shows and whatnot. But I'm a big tech guy. Recently switched to the iPhone, so I gotta ask, what's your favorite piece of tech? I know, right? I did. I did.
I'm so proud of you.
Oh God, here we go. Jesus.
One of us. One of
No,
us.
don't put that devil on me. What's your favorite piece of tech out right now?
All right, so I'll answer it twice because when you say piece of tech, I think of hardware, but so Peachy's going to share pictures with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I came across some software. It's a phone app. It's called Hipstamatic, and it's basically one of those phone cameras that has filters. But this one has filters and lenses and different types of film. And when you combine them together, you get different effects. And so recently, we went to Italy and did a vacation there, and talk about great subject matter. I would kind of compose a picture, and I would have this software up, and just the dramatic blues and the colors that it would add, and if you shot it in black and white, it would almost make it monochrome. And and you're thinking in your head, I want it to look like this. Like I took a picture in Venice. It was this little cafe, and it had two windows, and there was a waiter coming at me with a tray, and I just happened to catch them, and it was in black and white, and it looked like it was shot like in the 40s. I mean, he's got this tux on, and everybody's having their cafe, and I mean, it was just, it was timeless, right? And I took another picture in Pompeii, and it was of Zeus, and it's a silhouette, and then you see the mountain in the background, and the sky is blue, and for every picture that I'm talking about, I gave Peachey the before the iPhone picture, because it when you snap a picture, it does the filter, but it also gives you the original picture, so you always have that. And the other thing that's cool about this app is that they do these party cameras. So I got this notice at Thanksgiving that I could download the Thanksgiving camera, and if you're old enough to remember this, when you would go to a wedding or something, there would be a basket full of those disposable
Oh yeah,
cameras,
I remember
and
that.
everybody would get one, and you'd
Yeah,
run around and take pictures,
yep.
right? So this is the same thing, that when it kicks off, everybody gets the app, and you have 10, 20, 30 people with this party camera, and they're all taking pictures, and it won't show the pictures right away. So then when the time is done, so it was Thanksgiving was the one we used. When the time was done, it started a countdown. 10 hours later, it said the pictures are ready. And so I'm getting text
What?
messages from my kids, because
What?
they took pictures, and I took pictures, and they were in Ohio and I was in Florida. And so we were all taking pictures. And then I got to see like what they ate, and every picture had like this orange yellow hue, because it was Thanksgiving, like that was the filter, right? And everybody could, like, then when you were looking at everybody's pictures, you can comment on them too. So not only is it really cool to be able to play with things that you see in your everyday life, and take pictures that are just over the top better than just a standard iPhone picture. But then there's this whole social aspect of it that kind of brings film back without film, because there's a couple settings where you can actually make it so it doesn't give you the result right away. It develops it, so it shows up, like in 15 minutes or like a day later or whatever.
That's kind of
I
cool.
turn that off.
I
Yeah,
was going to
it
say,
is
I would
kind of
want
cool.
the
Yeah.
instant gratification. I want it now.
Yeah,
Like, to give
yeah,
it to me
exactly.
now.
Yeah, I've done film. That's okay. Yeah.
I
So
don't need to wait. I've done that before. Yeah.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah.
I love it. Okay. Lastly, plug in your socials. Where, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, where could they find you?
I am only on LinkedIn. I don't have Facebook, and I don't have Instagram, and I don't have Twitter, but I am on LinkedIn, and I do get a lot of vendors, like we all do. But if you start your message with, "Hey Todd, saw you on the podcast," and I don't see that you are an opportunity manager, then I will for sure hit you back. I love to meet new people, and if you're I'm usually, because it's close to me, I'm usually at the Gartner Data and Analytics conference, supporting my company. If I'm there this year, and I'll put my information in the Gartner tool. If you end up going there, you can ping me on the Gartner tool, and I'll meet you for coffee or something if you just want to talk. But yeah, the best way to get me is on LinkedIn, and or you can hit up Scott, and he knows how to get a hold of me.
Absolutely. 100% do. Sir, it's been an honor. I appreciate you, my brother.
I appreciate you, man. This has been a great experience,
Great.
and I'm honored that you invited me. So
Of
thank you so
course.
much.
Absolutely. So, okay, if you're watching on YouTube, if you made it all the way to the end, consider doing all the YouTube things like share, subscribe, thumbs up, leave a comment, do all those YouTube things. If you're watching on your favorite podcasting application, please consider giving it a 5-star review. Todd Anello, thank you so much. All his information for LinkedIn will be in the description for both the podcasting application as well as the YouTube description as well. This has been episode number 14. I believe it's 14 with Data with Peachey, and we'll have yet again another guest probably coming up soon. I'm going to put this one out probably about a week after we just had our other one. So it's going to be quick back to back. Normally I try to go a couple weeks, but this is special. I got to get this one out. So go Bucks. Again, at the time of this recording, Ohio State and Michigan have not played yet. Go Bucks. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Go blue.
Oh no, I'm sorry. It's muted. Oh, that's weird. Oh, it's totally weird. Your mic.
Yeah, whatever.
All right,
Yeah.
y'all. Be good at it. Be good at it. This has been Data with Peachy. Thank you so much. And we will all see you on the flip side.